A very good evening to all my dear CA Inter students and also to CA Foundation students who have now started watching these videos after their exam. Well, students, we had taken a break from our booster lectures, but I thought that since the series has already been started, we should complete it. So I'll be regularly posting booster videos. These are 15 minutes lectures covering the most important topics in just 15 minutes. So today we are going to discuss questions from prospectus and allotment. I have shortlisted 3 questions from your study material. So if you are not having your study material with you while watching these videos, then do bring your study material, pause the video and quickly go and bring the study material, and let us discuss the first question which I have selected today, section 447. Okay, it's not a question exactly, but yes, this is one section in which most of the students have doubt as far as the limits are concerned. So I thought, why not discuss that and clear their doubt. Students, this is on page 3.35 of your study material, punishment for fraud, section 447. The first paragraph need not be read by you because this is already given in a table form on the next page. So ignore this, okay? Even if you don't study this, it is all right. On the next page, you will find a table. This is section 447 given in tabular form. Now, what exactly is section 447 and when are the provisions applicable? Section 447 is a general provision where you want to give punishment for fraud. Now, students, in context to what we are studying, prospectus, if the prospectus is misleading, so in that case, directors, promoters, officers, they may be subject to punishment for fraud under section 447. So it's a very general section. It will apply whenever there is fraud and you wish to punish the parties involved in fraud. So what are the provisions of section 447? The module actually clearly represents it in a tabular form. We will go through that table. I have written small and short notes, so you can pause the video and write it later in your module. Now, if the amount of fraud, see, we are discussing punishment for fraud. So the punishment will be determined by the amount involved in fraud. So if the amount of fraud is less than the limits, then the punishment given in the first row will apply. But if the fraud amount is more than the limits, then the punishment given in the second row will apply. Now let's say that the fraud amount is less than the limits, then the punishment in first row will apply. So I have also taken numbers. We will compare 1% of the turnover with 10 lakhs, whichever is less. Okay, so let's say that 1% of my turnover comes to 12 lakhs. I'm assuming we will compare it with 10 lakhs. If the amount of your fraud is less than 10 lakhs, then the punishment in first row will apply. Otherwise, the punishment given in the second row will apply. So let's say that the amount of fraud is 6 lakh rupees. Okay, it is 6 lakhs. So the first row says that 10 lakhs or 1% of turnover, that is 12 lakhs, whichever is less. So if the amount is less than 10 lakhs, punishment in first row. If the amount of fraud is more than 10 lakhs, then punishment in the second row. So my fraud amount is 6 lakh rupees. So punishment in the first row will apply. That is, the person will be subject to fine up to rupees 50 lakhs or imprisonment up to 5 years. Can be both also. So that is why they have written and. So fine will be up to 50 lakhs or imprisonment up to 5 years, or it may be both. Now I have also written another variation that can come over here. So what if 10 lakh rupees compared with 1 lakh of the turnover? 1 lakh I'm assuming is 8 lakh rupees. So whichever is less, okay, so amount comes to 8 lakhs. So if the amount of your fraud is less than 8 lakhs, then the punishment in the first row will apply. And if the amount is more than 8 lakhs, then the punishment in the second row will apply. So I hope you are getting me. Yes. So you need to actually first calculate the limits. calculate whichever is less, then compare it with the amount of your fraud. So if the amount of my fraud is, let's say, 9 lakh rupees, okay, it is 9 lakh rupees, then it is more than 8 lakhs the limit, the punishment in the second row will apply. So I hope you're getting my point. You can also write down in stepwise. Step 1, calculate the limit. Step 2, see whichever is less. Step 3, then you compare those limits with the amount involved in fraud. If it is less, row 1 will apply. If it is more, then row 2 will apply. What if the fraud amount is more than the limit? Then fine will be amount equal to fraud, amount involved in fraud, subject to maximum 3 times the amount involved in fraud, and, okay, the word is now and, minimum 6 months imprisonment, which may extend to maximum 10 years. So what if the fraud also affects public interest? That is, it affects people at large. Then in that case, the amount of fine will remain the same, but imprisonment will increase from 6 months to 3 years. So this is just a variation of the second point given. If the amount of fraud is more than the limit and it also involves public interest, then the only change is that 6 months imprisonment will now increase to minimum 3 years, maximum is the same. So this is section 447, not very frequently asked in the exam, but it can be asked. You may be expected to write these provisions in the exam. Now, can you write in tabular form? Yes. You need not write it in this paragraph form. It is actually very difficult to remember, but you can very well write it in the tabular form as it is given in the module. Now, students, the second question which I have chosen today is one very important question as far as my estimate is concerned. It can be asked in the exam. Now, why is it important and why have I chosen it? The reason is that you will not find these provisions in the theory part because there is no separate concept actually in 2013 Act. Now, what do I mean by that? There is no separate provision, there is no separate concept as irregular allotment. Now, in 1956 Act, we had special provisions for irregular allotment. There was punishment also. But now what has the 2013 Act done? In 2013, there is no concept as irregular allotment. Okay. The term irregular allotment is covered in the respective section. The punishment is given in the respective section itself. So there is no concept of irregular allotment, but there is a question in the module, and I think that is important for exam. Companies Act does not specifically provide for the term irregular allotment. It was, yes, explained in the 1956 Act. Hence, we have to examine the requirements of proper issue of securities and consider the consequences in the risk of non-fulfillment in the respective section itself. So instead of finding what is irregular allotment, we will actually go to the respective section and see what if the terms are not, if the terms or provisions of that section is not complied with, then we conclude that, okay, the allotment is irregular, and let's see what the punishment is in the respective section itself. So in broader terms, allotment is irregular when there is violation of. So how will you remember these section numbers, students? Now it is nothing but table of 3, okay? In the second number, see, 23, 26, 39 and 40. How will you remember? 3, 6, 9. Okay, it is the table of 3, 3, 6, 9. So 23, 26, 39. That is how you will remember. It is just like a funny hint which I have thought of. And section 40, 39, 40, 39, 40. Okay, 26, 23, 26, 39, 40. So 23, say it along with me. 23, 26, 39, 40. Okay, so if there is violation of section number 23, 26, 39, 40, then the allotment is termed as irregular allotment. Now, there are small notes which I have made in the answer itself. You can later on pause the video and copy this in your study material. Okay. Now, when is the allotment irregular? When it is a violation of section 23. Now, what is in section 23? Section 23 actually explains what is public offer and private placement. They say that a private company can go for only private placement, but a public company can offer shares either to the public by public offer, or they can offer securities to a selected group of persons by following the provisions of section 42, which relate to private placement. So it actually explains what is public offer and private placement, and how the companies, that is private and public company, can offer shares to the public. If you are offering shares to the public through public offer, then you will have to issue a prospectus. Now the company does not issue a prospectus at the time of offering share securities to the public, then whatever allotment is made is termed as irregular allotment. Okay. Prospectus issued by the company does not include any matters as required to be included under section 26(1). So you need not remember the subsection over here. The reason is that it is not very important for exam. You can remember only the main section number, that is 26. So prospectus does not include the matters as required. Now section 26 actually covers the provisions relating to matters to be stated in the prospectus. You have to ensure that your prospectus contains those matters. Your prospectus does not contain the matters as required by the act. Any allotments made will be termed as irregular allotment. Or the information given is misleading, faulty, or incorrect. So this point actually has two subpoints. Yes. So if your prospectus is misleading, then the allotment is termed as irregular allotment. Prospectus has not been filed with ROC as required under section 2 subsection 4. So if you are issuing a prospectus to the public, please send one copy to the ROC. You have not sent and you have made allotments. Allotment is irregular. The minimum subscription as required under section 39 has not been met. So you have not received the amount of minimum subscription and you have made the allotments. Then allotment will be termed as irregular. So section 39 actually talks about allotment of securities by the company. The company must receive the minimum subscription, otherwise they cannot allot shares to the public. The minimum amount which they have received on application is less than 5% of the nominal value, face value of securities, or some lower amount as prescribed by SEBI, or it is lower than the amount prescribed by SEBI. So the amount that you have received on application is less than 5% of the nominal value of securities, or it is lower than the amount required by SEBI. So we generally see 5% of the nominal value should be received, but here it is not so. And if you have made allotments, then it is irregular. In case of public issue, you need to obtain approval from one or more stock exchange where you have applied for listing and you have not received their approval. In spite of that, you have allotted shares. What is given in section 40? Now section 40 actually deals with securities to be dealt in with the stock exchange. That is the heading. The provision says that every company making public offer, they shall, before making such offer, make an application to one or more stock exchange where they wish to list their securities, and they should also ensure that they have obtained the consent of the stock exchanges wherein they have offered the securities for listing. Now, if you have made an application, then your prospectus should mention that I have made an application to these stock exchanges, we will receive approval. It is also possible that you have made the application, you have also received the approval. So mention that fact in the prospectus. Now law says that you had made an application, then you had issued the prospectus stating that I have made an application, but you have not received approval from those stock exchanges. In spite of that, you have offered, you have allotted shares to the public, then that allotment will be irregular allotment. Okay. So in case of public issue, the approval has not been obtained from one or more stock exchange. You have applied, but you have not obtained the approval. And in spite of that, you have made allotments. So students, many possibilities are possible over here. You have applied, you have not received, okay, they have declined, they have denied the listing, but in spite of that, you have allotted. You have only applied, you are awaiting listing, okay, you are awaiting their approval for listing. Okay, you are waiting for their approval for listing. And in that meantime, okay, in that time gap, you have allotted the shares. How can you allot without receiving approval for listing? then that allotment will be irregular allotment. Okay, so the approval has not been obtained from one or more stock exchanges, but in spite of that you have allotted shares, and that allotment will be irregular. All right, so I think irregular allotment can be asked as a theory question, so we have discussed that. The last question which I have identified over here, students, is relating to private placement. Okay, now I had done a separate video on private placement, so please go and watch that video. You can press the I button over there and it will take you to that video wherein I have discussed private placement in detail, so I'm not covering that now. In a year, you can offer shares through private placement to maximum 200 persons. Okay, so that limit is 200 in a financial year. It does not include QIBs, that is qualified institutional buyers, meaning everything is explained in that video. It does not include the shares which are offered to employees through either a scheme of employee stock option. So that is not included as in the limit of private placement. So you can offer shares to, now what they have written over here, this is one confusion which many students have. I'm first discussing the theory, then I'll read the question also for you. The offer shall not be made to 50 or such higher number as may be prescribed. So if you read the Bare Act, they will say that private placement should not be offered to more than 50 persons or such higher limit. In the rules, then they have mentioned the limit. So what is prescribed? It cannot be offered to more than 200 persons in a financial year. Okay, so you have to see the limits given in the rule. So as per the rule, you can now give offer to a selected group of persons. You can offer the share securities through private placement to a maximum of 200 persons in a financial year. So this is the limit which we will consider because this is prescribed through the rules. This limit will be counted separately for each type of security. So the limit for shares, for debentures, it will be different. There are different types of securities. Now this is one very important provision on which the question is based. Now the reason why I'm reading the provisions first and then we will read the question is because you will be able to identify the answer in the question if you have recollected the provision. So what we are doing is we are trying to recollect the provisions and then we will read the question so that you can understand, oh, this is the provision on which the question is based. A company is not permitted to make fresh issue under this section if the allotment in respect of the offer made earlier has not been completed or otherwise has been withdrawn or abandoned by the company. Say, for example, the company had offered shares through private placement, but they have not completed the allotment, and before that they offer another type of security or maybe the same kind of security, but law says that you have not even completed allotment of the earlier security and you are offering another security through private placement. See, it is possible that you had offered shares through private placement. You are offering more shares even before the allotment is complete. You had offered shares through private placement. Now you are offering debentures even before the allotment for the previous issue is complete. At least complete the allotment of the previous issue. Then you go for another issue through private placement. Now, in this case, if you have already made one issue and then before it is allotted you go for the second, you are offering the securities again through private placement, then it is in violation of the provisions of this section. We will not apply the provisions of private placement. In fact, this will be treated as if it is a public offer and all the provisions of public offer shall apply. So these are the points which you need to remember. Now let us read the question. Now you will be able to understand and apply these provisions. See, the answer is hidden in the question itself. You just need to identify the provisions on which this question is based. PQR Bakers, they want to raise funds for an upcoming project. Accordingly, it has issued private placement offer letters to 55 persons, of which 4 are qualified institutional buyers, QIBs, remaining are individuals. So we will analyze in while reading the question itself. Out of 55 persons, there are 4 QIBs. Anyways, they are not included while calculating the limit for private placement. So over here we have technically offered shares to 51 individuals, which is I think within the limits of 200 persons. Ignore 50 now. Okay, so the rule has specified that we can offer securities through private placement to 200 persons in a financial year. So here it is 51, it is within the limit. Now, see students, this is the hint. Before the completion of allotment of shares under this offer letter, the company has now issued another private placement offer letter to another 155 persons in their individual names for issue of debentures. It doesn't matter, you can issue any kind of security, but that is possible only when the allotment for the previous issue is complete. Being a public company, is it possible for PQR to issue securities under private placement? Yes. Even a public company can offer shares through private placement. See, public company can go for public offer, or it can issue shares through private placement. There's no restriction. As long as you're complying with the provisions, there is no restriction. So by doing so, whether the company is now in compliance with the provisions relating to private placement, or should these offers be considered as public offers? Now in this case, they are offering debentures even before they have completed allotment of shares. So they have not complied with the provisions of this section. Both these offers will be considered as if they are public offers. Now, in the given case, though a public company, private placement is allowed. The company has given offer to 55 persons, out of which 4 are QIBs. But even then, 51 is within the limit of 200 persons. So the company has complied with the provisions of private placement. But what about the second offer? They have given another private placement offer of debentures even before completing the allotment in respect of first offer. Therefore, the second does not comply with the provisions. Now, one is complying, the other is not complying. Both will be considered as if they are public offers. Now, students, you may think that, but the first offer is complying with the provisions. It is within the limits. So, only the second offer should be treated as public offer. But no, as per the provisions and the wordings given over here, the offers, both the offers will be treated as public offer. But if the company gives offer for the debentures in the same financial year after, okay, they are giving after the allotment is complete, then both will be treated as private placement. Okay, so if one is complying with the provisions, other is not, then both will be treated as public offer. Many students had confusion first in these limits, whether we should consider 50 or we should consider 200. Then their second confusion was, will both be considered as public offer or just one? So here I have clarified their confusion. So students, I hope I have not discussed the theory because I have a separate video covering that. So I have jumped directly to the provisions which are relevant to this question, but please mark this as very important question for exam students. Question can be asked in the exam. So with this, we come to an end of our discussion. I have extended the time limit of my booster videos, but I felt that we need to discuss these questions in detail. In the next video, I will continue with the booster lectures on unit 4, and we will try to cover everything unit wise. If you have already started studying, okay, you have given your CA foundation exam, but you have already started studying, do visit my website 𝗟𝗲𝗔𝗇𝗎𝒡𝑟𝑦𝒫learning.com for a variety of products, books, test series and video lectures for CA entered law. If you are a foundation student and you're watching these videos, then we have something for you also. There are so many things, so many books, test series, video lectures for CA foundations. We have study calendar. So do visit my website 𝗟𝗲𝗔𝗇𝗎𝒡𝗟𝗲𝒡𝗎𝒡𝗉𝒻𝒻.com for a variety of offers.